Hello, and welcome to the weekly voice chat of the Men's Human Rights Discord server. We are the semi-official server of the Men's Rights subreddit. Today we have a special guest, Tim Goldich, who is the vice president of the National Coalition for Men. And today's topic is the war in Ukraine, and by extension, the issues of conscription and the draft and male disposability. If you look at your screen now, you can see the text chat page is on the screen. This is a very active part of the chat. Please do pay attention to it because it's a place where we post a lot of relevant links. For example, right now I'm going to post a tweet yesterday showing Ukraine's Interior Ministry says that men between the ages of 18 and 60 are banned from leaving the country. And this is what happens during wars. Men are basically asked to die whether they want to be in the war or not. I just posted a second link which says the Union of the Committees of Soldiers' Mothers of Russia, Russia's oldest NGO in the field, reports draftees being forced to sign contracts and shipped off to the border with Ukraine. And this is kind of something that I want to talk about. You know, when you read about casualties in war, a lot of times the media will say, oh, there was 100 deaths, including civilians or including women and children, as
Yes.
if the civilian deaths are somehow a different thing and the soldiers' deaths, oh, that's okay, they're the soldiers. A soldier is just someone who used to be a civilian and now they have a uniform and a weapon. And yes, some of them are volunteers, but a lot of them are not volunteers. A lot of them are forced to be there. And for the record, I completely support Ukraine. I'm very much against Putin. I am 100% anti Putin, so I'm not taking Russia's side. And as a Republican, I will just say I think that the death of Vladimir Putin would be good news for the world. So this whole thing about how somehow the right wing is supporting Russia is completely a myth. It's not true at all. It's not for me. That's not how I feel at all. I'm very much against Vladimir Putin. I think he is to blame. I think he's a psychopath, and I think he is a murderer because people are dying now, including his own people. That shouldn't have to be. But to me, the men's rights movement is a movement that is against war, that is against the draft, and is against deaths, both military and civilian. Our position would be that we support peace. I'm going to post another tweet, and it says Russian conscript soldiers, basically children, are being transferred to the border with Ukraine. They are forced to change their status to contract soldiers. Physical abuses are used against those who refuses. So Russian kids, 18, 19-year-olds, are being forced to do this. And again, once again, just so there's no confusion, just so no one plays this back and tries to twist my words, I support Ukraine on this issue 100%. So I am 100% anti-Putin, 100% pro-Ukraine. But this is the reality of war. Young men are forced to die over issues that they want nothing to do with. And my guess is 90% of Russian and Ukraine soldiers don't want this war. So, that's kind of our position on this as a men's rights activist. I think the whole thing is bad. And I know that Men Are Human, has links about 16-year-olds being forced to get drafted. And by the way, I don't blame, here we go. So you can see Ma just tweeted that 16-year-olds were mobilized to join. And even if a 16-year-old volunteers, I mean, imagine when you're that young and that impressionable, how easy it would be to draft you. And I don't blame Ukrainian soldiers for shooting and killing one of those 16-year-old conscripts. If you're shooting at me, I'm shooting back. So 100% I support Ukraine's right to defend itself. And if a Ukrainian soldier shoots a Russian soldier, I don't blame him for that. He's defending himself. He's being attacked. The real enemy here, to me, the real bad guy, is Vladimir Putin. He is the one who deserves the blame. He is the one who is responsible for all these people dying.
Thank you, Blue. And it should be noted that 415 Russian soldiers have died so far without them taking a single objective. So men are dying on the ground. And it's also worth noting that feminist Twitter and Reddit has come out saying, "Oh, war is a feminist issue. Look at, this woman had her house blown up and things like that." But this is small potatoes. I mean, obviously, it's awful that her house got blown up. But the main issue here is that young men are being forced to fight and die against their will. They are being literally in Donetsk, I think it's pronounced. They are literally being drafted off the streets and sent to die. This isn't in the news. This is just what we've heard from people on Twitter. But it seems like a very reasonable and realistic thing to uh, you know believe. Basically, uh, we think that this entire region is basically drafting young men, and they are being sent off to die. So it's like as young as 16 in some cases, but it's possible even younger because when they say a certain age get conscripted, generally speaking, there's leeway either side of that. So yeah, back to blue. Oh, I should mention our original topic here tonight was going to be boys being trafficked, and I think this actually plays into this. But we've decided to go with the news on this one and talk about the unfolding situation. But if we want to work in boys being trafficked, that's absolutely fine. This we consider this a linked, part of the larger chain of men's issues. So this is just another link in a horrifying chain. The boys being sent to die is in these wars are basically being trafficked. I mean, they're literally being put on trucks against their will and sent off to the front. The only real difference is they're being given a gun. So it's yeah. Anyway, back to blue on this one.
Yeah, I mean, think about trafficking is when you kidnap somebody and you use their body for profit. How is the draft or conscription not the same thing? I mean, you're basically forcing yourself on someone else's body and you are telling them what they can do. You don't have the freedom to walk away. They are essentially, it is in a way, the draft is kind of assault. I mean, it's you're controlling somebody, you're kind of kidnapping somebody, and you're telling them what they have to do, and you are forcing them to go into a dangerous situation that they don't want to be in. I mean, I understand why it's not exactly like kidnapping, of course, there's differences, but when you really think about it morally, if you're starting a war that's not necessary, it's not self defense, it's just an assault. We think of people like Napoleon and Alexander the Great as being these great people, but really were they? Because they didn't need to do what they did. They wanted to do what they did. And they forced thousands of people to die to get what they wanted. Not what they needed, but what they wanted. So, how great were they really? So, when you think about war, it's other people dying. And by other people, the vast majority is young men dying for somebody else's benefit. How is that, in a way, not trafficking? A lot of people are commenting on the fact how these 18 to 22-year-old boys are being sent to die, so it does seem like it's something people are aware of and people can acknowledge. And Ma just sent a great tweet. We are Male disposability, we are preconditioned to accept that when young men die in war, it's just normal. And I think I've quoted this before, and I hate to quote a Hollywood movie, but it's such a great quote. It's the Joker, Heath Ledger from Dark Knight, where he says, if I tell people that a truckload of soldiers will die tomorrow, nobody panics because it's all according to plan. But if I say that one little old mayor is going to die, everybody loses their minds. And the point of that quote to me was how Men dying in war is a part of the plan. So nobody really panics when it happens. It's just normal. It's just something you read in the newspaper. And we see the same thing. The Sarah Everett woman in London, which of course was tragic when she was murdered. Men are murdered every day, and the media mostly ignores it. But when a woman is murdered, it becomes a national news story. And we just have a different reaction to the deaths of men. We just don't care about the deaths of men. It's just seen as something that's normal. And when I say men, this includes teenage boys, even a 16-year-old boy getting blown to shreds is just something that, oh well, that happens, that's normal, we accept that, and that's fine. But it does seem like we're kind of beginning to shift on that at a societal level. It's like we're kind of beginning to understand that, oh yeah, you know, men are human, right? Men are people too. So when a man dies in a war, it's just like a woman dying at home. It's a human being killed.
It is very, very unpleasant to have to say it, but we do have to take advantage of this to show people what's going on. Well, not take advantage is the wrong word, I think. We need to show people what this is and just send them links, send links to your family, send links to everyone you can, and just show them what's going on. And they will likely come to their own conclusions about this and realize what is happening to themselves. And they, I think this is going to be a red pill moment for a lot of people because we're just seeing so much about like the drafting and the just the carnage already. This has been going on for a day, and there's already 450 people dead. 450 men dead. See the language that
Yes,
they
yes,
use. It creeps up on you.
right. Even we can fall into that same trap. It's so
Yeah,
ingrained. Yeah, I was listening to a lot of NPR and the phrase, yeah, women and children will suffer most came up more than once. It's astonishing. We have to understand it's based in instinct. So, but we also have to understand that instinct can work in our favor also. I believe the world does still look to men to solve the problems, to take responsibility. It's hard to look at a situation like this and see the opportunities in it, but where where gender politics is concerned, my vision has always been for a men's movement that took leadership and led gender politics toward a new era of fairness and balance and sustainability and a healthier future. I think men are in the position to do that. I think we really one issue is men are so beaten down, they're so shamed. We've been so incredibly shamed. That's perhaps the biggest hurdle in our way. But as men, we have to still take a certain confidence in humanity's extra willingness to and extra desire to uh, for men to take leadership. If only men will lead wisely. Of course, you've got this Putin character who models how men may lead in the worst way, but we of the politicized men's movement can offer up a male leadership that is healthy and visionary and seeks to repair the social fabric and heal the divide between woman and man. That's my hope, and we can also take leadership around this draft and war as the primary victims in war. or in a stronger position to protest war.
So apparently, this is more Ukraine. So, from my understanding of the article, or I'll just read it out loud to you, the specific section. Women are required to sign up for potential draft. Women more than 100 occupations are required to register for military service, Ukraine's defense ministry ordered. Yet they will not be drafted, Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Lieutenant General Valery Zalziny said. So they are signing up, but they won't be drafted, is what he's saying.
I was seeing a lot of women being interviewed in Ukraine, sounding very, very brave, sounding very, very ready to fight and die. But I don't think that women will be at equal risk in military service as compared to men.
Well, I should think that more men have died since the beginning of this war so far than women in total will die during the entire conflict, assuming it plays out like a normal war. If it plays out like Syria or any of those other places, more men will die. That is just an absolute fact. Because the men are being hunted down and killed, the women are not being hunted down and killed. The women are being ushered onto the evacuation buses.
Yeah.
So the women will get out, the men will stay, and the men will die. That's simply how it goes. That's really every single war in a nutshell. And in fact, I should mention that Putin actually did pulled a classic trick to justify this war, which is to say that women and children in Ukraine are in danger, and
Yeah.
he's going to rescue them. This is an extremely, extremely classic trick. This is the sort of thing that people back in the mud hut days would do. That tribe over there is threatening our women and our children. We must destroy them. And by destroy them, they mean the men, and then the women and children will be brought into the fold, and any boys over a certain age will be slaughtered. They'll be marched past the cartwheel, and if their head is higher than the hub, it'll be chopped off. And that is literally how they did it in Genghis Khan's time. That's how they've done it in basically every war. The men are lined up and shot, the women remain behind, and the media will focus on the female victims who are left behind, who are still alive, and they will, by and large, totally ignore the men who are dead.
Yes.
That is the template for every war that has ever happened.
A theorist named Adam Jones calls it gendercide. And there's a book by that title that details exactly what you're talking about.
I would call it that too. And in fact, there is a theory, it might be part of that one, that every so often countries reach a point where they unconsciously decide to purge the majority of their men in an almost ritualistic fashion by sending them all off to die in war. Like they've got enough men, so they send them off to die in war. And then we have heard that births of males increase dramatically in the wake of a war and during a war because of the sheer number of dead men. The women's bodies themselves work to repopulate the males. So I don't know for sure if that's true or not, but if it is, then it just goes to show you that this is written right into our DNA at the most fundamental level.
Yes. Well, my understanding is that 104 males are born for every 100 females, and it has always been so. And that appears to just be a compensation that nature has created, knowing that the attrition rate for males is higher.
Conflict is actually a good time for men to be trafficked because you can draft men at will and send them off to die. And of course, feminists for years and years and years have been saying that there's never going to be another draft. The draft is, It's not relevant anymore. The last draft was Vietnam. It's not going to happen. Drafts are happening all over the world. Wherever there is war, the chances are there's going to be conscripts. And there are very few armies around the world which push comes to shove and the country is losing, that there are very few that are not going to start drafting men. It is war slavery. It is a kind of slavery. Yeah, you're just sent to die. You are a disposable body. Your job is to soak up bullets for the more trained soldiers. I mean, anyone who's played the strategy game knows that there are cheap units you can pump out en masse, and you put those units at the front while the more expensive units sit at the back and lob fire over their heads. And if the cheaper units happen to get caught in an explosion or anything like that, it doesn't really matter because all they are there for is to distract the enemy and keep them from hitting the more expensive units. The expensive units in this case being your tanks and your trained soldiers who have your professionals who've been in the army training for years and who you've put a lot of time and money into. The conscripts won't have very great kit, as we've mentioned. And obviously, outside of conscripts, boys are enslaved in fruit picking, is a big one. If you are a boy who has run away from home because of abuse or something like that, the chances are you are much more likely to end up as a fruit picker or in some other sort of backroom, extremely low paid
Mhm.
job where you are at their mercy than anything else. And the chances are, if you end up with the wrong people, you're not going to be paid. You're going to be forced to pick food until you fall over. And then, look, they will just treat you like a slave. You'll have to
Yeah.
get up and pick more. Boys have always been in high demand for slave jobs, for climbing inside machines where they might not survive, for all kinds of things like this. And there is a very, very profitable underground trade in young boys and men who are sent into these things. And there is also the sex trade as well, which targets boys just as much as girls. They just aren't, people just aren't paying attention to them.
And consider how extraordinary that is. Because we all know, I mean, it's perfectly obvious that the girls' bodies are more valued, sexually valued than boys' bodies. So what does it tell us when the trafficking and sexual trafficking for boys is equal to that of girls? It just shows how disposable the boys are, how little concern, how little empathy, how little compassion these boys elicit. That just makes it easier to just use boys sexually. And a researcher named Lloyd DeMaz will demonstrate that that goes on, that's been going on all through history. Shows how in the Roman Empire, it was far more boys than girls being sexually abused, as used. There were boy brothels. Uh, so even sexually, females are still being relatively protected, even though certainly demand and desire for girls' bodies exceeds that of the sexual desire for boys' bodies. I would take that as self-evident.
Yeah, in places like Afghanistan and the Middle East, it has a name, Bakabazi. I'm not sure how to pronounce that exactly, but it means quote unquote boy play. And essentially, if you look up the dancing boys of Afghanistan, you'll find out way more than you wanted to know about it.
Mhm.
It's essentially an ancient cultural practice where boys are dressed up as girls and forced to dance, and then they are sexually abused. They're basically prostitutes, a lot of them. And this goes on until they're able to either, if they can, they might end up dancing in clubs and things after the after they age out of it. If they're not lucky, the odds are pretty good. They're either going to get dumped on the streets or killed, because it's just you have this abused boy, and you don't really want people, you know, you don't really want that coming back to you. So the best solution is just to kill them, possibly. But a lot of the times, the official system is basically they go to poor families, they find the best looking like young boys, and they buy them off the family. Basically, they pay the family to take them, and then they just pull them into this depraved system uh, where they're exhibited and abused. And I mean, it is prostitution. It's unwilling forced prostitution, and it is pretty much a cultural norm in a lot of places. It's just what they do. And this is something you'll find in other places around the world as well. It has different names, it has the same face, and it's pretty much just boys being abused. But what you won't probably hear about Bakabazi in the mainstream media is that these boys often end up as suicide bombers. So you see, this is another way of disposing of them when you don't have a use for them anymore. They will be gifted to people, and with the order that they assassinate that person, or they'll simply be gifted them. Like, you can just gift them. So some of them, a certain percentage of them, will be told, given some sort of weapon and told to assassinate this person. And then the boy basically, he gets killed whether he succeeds or not. The chance of him actually getting out are very low, but they're disposable assets. So when you hear about boys in suicide vests being shot in the Middle East, that is basically, quite a percentage of them are going to be these abused boys. Some of them are boys who are just like Boko Haram style, kidnapped from their homes, forced into camps where they are trained, and then sent to the front line. Those are that's another form of male trafficking that isn't talked about very much. And it's
Well, I'm
worth
sure
noting
you've
here
heard about what is done to boys that are maimed, disfigured, in order to make them more pitiable and they can bring in more money as beggars. Um,
oh yeah, they'll chop arms and legs off, and
yeah,
they'll disfigure their faces. They'll
yes,
burn them with acid.
right. Make them as hideous as possible so people will give them money.
But hideous in a very particular way, which is that they will make sure that they still have a level of like that kind of childish cuteness. So
Hmm.
they'll destroy part of them. They'll destroy enough of them that it ruins them forever. But they'll still, just enough that you'll still pity them. You
Yeah,
won't think they're just some horrible little trolloc that's crept out from under a bridge somewhere. It's yeah, and it's if you know these old cultures, you'll know that chopping off arms and legs and things is something that you of legal punishment. So this is going to be something that's going to cause people to assume things about the boy, that he's a thief or something like that. So that's something that's going to follow them for the rest of their life. and they are very unlikely to get one of these fancy new prosthetic robot arms that we in the West enjoy. They're just going to be on the street for the rest of their lives, committing crimes, dragged into crimes, because that's another thing that people forget about boy trafficking victims is they get groomed as criminals.
That's
We
right.
mentioned last, yeah,
And
we
then they
mentioned last week.
consequences when they're caught.
Yeah, they'll use them to run drugs. They are very much hot property when it comes to robbery, as we mentioned last week, because they can fit it into tight places. They can climb in through windows and open doors. They get treated like trained monkeys, basically. So it is. It's not a nice life being one of these boys. It's quite horrifying, and the sexual abuse is only one nasty, unpleasant factor in this entire web of horrifying things. And the thing that people don't really want you to know is that huge chunk of child traffickers are women. Now, a lot of people will try to tell you at this point, but these are former abuse victims who were basically forced into it, and they don't, it's all they've ever known, and they're brainwashed and stuff like that. No, 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 no. These women are there of their own free will. This is a very much a adult woman taking young children and coaxing them to come back with her and then selling them herself. That is the kind of situation we're talking about. Sometimes they'll have a partner who's in on this as well, and they will perhaps pose as a couple, and they will offer boys shelter. They'll offer children generally shelter, and they'll take them in, and they might be very nice to them at first. They might give them sweets and things like that. And then comes the abuse. They'll be sold off or something like that, or they'll be prostituted. They'll be forced to work to pay them back. And working to pay your rescuer back is something of a trope in this, and it's not something that's very well known, but it is something that I have seen represented in Hollywood fairly accurately. That they'll, you've got to pay us back now. You've got to, you've got to work and pay us back. I mean, obviously, Hollywood only shows this happening to girls, but in the rare films where they cover child trafficking, they will do this.
You may remember the scene from Slumdog Millionaire where a boy has hot oil poured in his eye to disfigure him. Yes, it has been depicted in Hollywood movies. It does exist. Of course, the victimization of women is far more prevalent in the movies, though.
So this is from the Real Stories Gallery Foundation. Now this is from 2007, but this is a post about sex slavery and male prostitution within the Russian army itself. So I'll just read, I'll say like maybe the first 4 paragraphs, since those are really the most relevant. According to the UN International Panel for Struggle Against Sexual Exploitation, the Russian army is plagued with male prostitution. A small amount of money is enough to find a Russian soldier prostitute in the center of Moscow. Servicemen may become male prostitutes in the Russian army for various reasons. There are young men who voluntarily offer sexual favors to their homosexual clients. Others are forced into prostitution against their will. Newcomers, especially those who finished higher schools before joining the army, suffer from sexual harassment more often. Brave soldiers try to protect their honor and rights, although there's no help for them. Commanders and military officials may often be involved in the sex business too. and someone's personal story in here. When I was standing on duty, 2 bullies came out to me and shoved me into the stockroom. A soldier serving at one of Moscow's military units recollects. They raped me there in turn. It was very painful and revolting. It didn't take them much time to finish, but the next day I started noticing other soldiers giving me strange looks. I instantly realized that those bastards let everyone know what they had done to me. An officer came up to me one day and said to me point blank, "Tomorrow you will serve 2 clients." I knew that if I had said no, then I would spend my last day spitting blood. But I still told him no. When the officer heard that, he pulled out pictures of me being raped in a stockroom. "If you don't serve the clients, your mother will see these pictures," said he. I was forced into prostitution, the soldier said. And then this last paragraph is yet another serviceman named only Ilya became a male prostitute during his 2nd month in the army. The young man received a letter from his girlfriend. The sergeant told me that day that I would no longer need girls. He and 3 other men forced me to go behind the barracks to the abandoned construction site. They made me kneel there, tied me up to a lamppost, and hit me several times in the groin. The pain was so strong and I lost the will to fight them back. They made me open my mouth and rape me. I don't remember how long it continued. When I came to my senses, I didn't want to live. I was seriously thinking about committing suicide. I was shocked that the rapists were visiting me regularly afterwards, bringing food and vodka to me. When it ended, they made me a prostitute. And so this happens to this is happening within the army. The younger, more recent servicemen are being bullied by the higher officials and some of the commanders themselves, who get a certain percentage out of this kind of business and get forced into prostitution, or else they'll send it to their family members or threaten their life, etc.
I would also like to add what might be an unpopular point of view about it, but all these males are victims. Even the victimizers are victims. Just remind that terrible things happen to these victimizers that turn them into victimizers. So these victimizers, they're victims also.
A while ago, Tim was talking about, at least what I believe is the solution to all of this, based on a different kind of leadership among men that, excuse me, acknowledges, even these, even the villains of the piece, the victimizers, they didn't arise in a vacuum. They are one product of a backlog of degradation and abuse, humiliation, dehumanizing. That is, as we've been talking about this whole time, that's just part and parcel of human cultures. It has always been the case that cultures progress and expand, and of course eventually fall because they marginalize the ordinary male in their midst. And once you do that, and you add to that, the eagerness to shame the ordinary male, and the eagerness to abuse and dispose of the ordinary male, then things like the stuff we're seeing in the chat, they can't be called a surprise. You can't, well, can't. It's not wise to try to frame it as shocking because it's not. But to create a leadership of men, that actually want to do something about all of this, and that are the kind of leaders that people are willing to follow, means, like I said, acknowledging all of this, and saying, this is things as they are right now, and it's the one thing to point it out and to raise the awareness of it, but it's something else entirely, for just large groups of ordinary men to find a way to rise above all of it and say, we're just not going to do this way anymore. And anyone willing to follow us, we're going this way. But anyone who wants to keep things the way they are, fine, but you're going to be doing it without us. That's the kind of leadership that will restore the necessary balance so that men and women can live with each other. And if we've gotten, and been pointing it out, if we've gotten to the point where there are large groups of women actually pleased about the idea that men will die and be abused and all of that, something has gone wrong. That is going to take more than just like throwing spitballs at each other online. It is going to take leadership, but it's going to have to be leadership that enough people of goodwill are willing to follow, that people willing to put their faith in us, and say, we don't understand what's going on, but, we're, we're going to pick up with you because this is no longer livable.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what happens is, humans are adaptable. They just continue adapting to it, until the culture just collapses. And when that happens, then the people that are really of bad will, and ill intent, they love that because then they can jump in and take over. I know I've seen in the chat and I hear around our circles, a lot of talk about what how the anti-male sentiment expresses itself in public, and that's one thing. But I go try to listen to what they say to each other. Okay, I'm not interested in what they had to say to us. Okay, I want to know what they're talking about behind the doors. And to be honest with you, all of these things are pleasing to them, because not because they are only morally corrupt, but it's useful to them. Any uh, like bedrock disruption and decay that they see, regardless of where it comes from, they are in favor of that because they want to frankly take over. They they want it all. And so far, say anything you want about it, but it's working. It has been effective for a long time. And the kind of leadership it takes to pull people away from that and make them aware of it. um, like I say, a few, two, three people in one online space or another, that's one thing. But if that kind of leadership becomes common among men, it becomes just part of the daily routine, that men are standing with each other and protecting each other and caring about each other. That's a longer path. But to be honest with you, until then, like I said, all of these things, all of the back and forth and all of the vitriol makes these people happy because that tells them that we are becoming less and less stable as a culture. And they're in it for for keeps. I mean, they they don't want to fix anything. They want it all to fall apart, and then they can come in and take over. This is what dictators do. So anyway, that's my take on it.
Yeah, we've noticed quite a few subreddits I'd like also to mention that are geared towards young women taking advantage of men and financially enslaving them, manipulating them, and even destroying them purely for the fun of it. We found quite a few. There's a new one we found called Diobelia. I'll post a link to it, but it's full of young women trying to destroy men and trying to get as much as they can out of them. So clearly, women know that, to quote the subreddit itself, women know that men are instinctively helpful towards women and will go out of their way to help them. And so they've created things like the headphone test, which is to find out how financially slavish a man is. Basically, what you do is second or third date or something, you before it, you mentioned that your headphones were broken or some other similarly valued item, and then you rate the man based on what he does. If he doesn't get you some new headphones, some new wireless headphones, you're supposed to dump him. If he gets you wired headphones, you're supposed to dump him. If he doesn't get you anything, you're supposed to dump him. But yeah, it's basically a test to see if you are going to basically fulfill the male role as a portable wallet.
So
Portable ATM.
the question is then, what kind of leadership does it take to, because let's face it, there are a lot of guys out there who will be happy to buy those headphones. What kind of leadership does it take, and what does it look like to help those men overcome that quote instinct and follow us?
Well,
Because
one thing
she is going to do what she's going to do, right?
well,
I mean, oh, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
well, again, I'm going to add what might not be a popular point of view around this, but these women that do this, that exploit men like this, that work manipulation like that, they're victims too. I mean, they're infantilized. They do not take any responsibility for their power, their weaponry, their efficacy. You know, they they're rendered a part of a faction of humanity known collectively as innocent women and children. So one hope around this is try and convince women that this system is not working for them either.
Yeah, that's true, Tim. As you know, I talk to a lot of women sort of, stuck in that place, and they're not happy. They don't like what they see either,
Well, that's right.
and
You know,
I can't blame them.
every measure of female happiness has plummeted in recent decades, and all over the world, the most feminist cultures produce the least happy women. So it's really not working for women either.
No, no, but like last night, I was listening to an interview between Lacey Green and the moderators of the female dating strategy subreddit. Like I said, I don't want to hear what they have to say to me. I want to hear what they talk about with each other. And basically, the plan is to make that kind of behavior as attractive and effective and doable as possible.
Let me ask you though: was Lacey sympathetic towards them, or was she on their side?
No, she. Well, I don't know, how much you guys know about Lacey Green, but she's sort of an OG trope of what feminism was for about a minute 10, 15 years ago. But no, she was trying to press for a more reasoned and at least morally comprehensible approach, but they weren't having it. And the reason they're not having it is because current day, their way is working. Okay. It is effective. Right. And it takes that. I guess we're going to have to call it an instinct or an impulse, that these very curtailed and infantilized women, their urge to take advantage of men and avoid responsibility, and they put it in, they put it on steroids, right? And they organize it and they make it, a process. When they talk to each other, that's the kind of language that they use. They make it clear, they are not happy with men as men. They're not. Okay. And their solution to it is to somehow shame them into becoming more like the kind of men we ought to be. And I'm like, well, good luck with that. But, like I say, for right now, it's at least giving them what they want, you know. And as I said, my question is, what kind of leadership and what kind of presence does it take to make that look like what it really is? How do we take that from being, a really lucrative grift, and a really successful attention-seeking tactic, and just make it look bad, And I'm not talking about, like I said, I'm not talking about the kind of women who really kind of at least understand, that what's really going on and how bad it is, because as Tim said it, they are not happy, but there are some who are, right? And it takes leadership to get people to stop supporting it, to stop, indulging uh, the bitter impulse, to, well, they did it to me, so I'm just going to do it back to them, type of attitude, because that's where all of that kind of comes from, is that they feel, shorted and disregarded and misused by men. So simple solution, you just do it back to them, and I mean, if you don't care about the future, that's probably a good idea, but I would rather, wake up tomorrow and have things be a little bit better than they are today instead of worse.
To be honest, I do
Exactly.
think
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes leadership.
I just wanted, oops, I'm sorry.
No, I say it takes leadership,
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of just go basically on what Les was saying is, I mean, he pretty much encapsulated all of it. It's the thing we always say in men's rights circles. Feminism has nothing to do with equal rights. Well, this is proof of it. And like it's always said, well, even if we didn't have feminism, we'd still have the same issues. So basically, you could put it down to gynocentrism / feminism, to where now I'm an artist, and the community that I actually live in is the you would call it, I guess, the proverbial, as far as the circle of women that I associate with, as far as that have kids that go to school with my sons, and so I get Les knows about that, because I straddle a fine line with that. But like whenever we're having a barbecue or any kind of around a fire pit or anything like that, the exactly what you're saying, the the general the gist, or what is being said, is the polar opposite of the reality. So what I mean by that is, when they say they want equality, that's code for favoritism. It's code for kissing their ass, because we're talking about those type of women. We're not talking about all women. And patronizing them and being chivalrous. Okay, so if you're not a massage to them, holding them equal and accountable is akin to misogyny, which is totally ass backwards, right? We all know that's totally ass backwards. So saying stupid stuff like, well, you said this to a woman, and you're going like, what difference does it make if I said it to a woman? I mean, I would have said the same thing to a man. Plus, what does her sex have to do with it rather than her attitude? So that kind of stuff has been like ingrained, and it's like reflexive. And I think on certain levels, I don't think they're all totally brainwashed to the point to where there's not a kernel of some awareness there. They're doing it and they partly know it is bullshit. So I disagree with Tim a little bit on that, in the sense that they're not completely brainwashed to where it's like, oh, they're so brainwashed into not taking responsibility they don't know they're not taking responsibility. I differ with that a little bit. I think that's part of it, but I think some of it is they know it's bullshit because I've seen them look at me straight in the face and say the most irrational shit on the planet. And I've said, you've got to be joking. You actually can't really say that to me with a straight face right now. There's no way, because you're an intelligent person. There's no way that you don't know what you said is kind of wonky. So I think it's a combination of both of those things. I think it's society not holding them accountable. Um, I don't care whether you call them manginas or whether you call them simps or whether you call them, just basically, trying to get women's attention and suck up to them. We have a society full of men that do that. And then they point to these men and go, right on, go, go, go. And these men get affirmation. They get a pat on the head. Okay. So it makes it even worse because they get that pat on the head. But let's be real here. Some of them are looking, I'm not saying all of them, but some of them are looking for a little more than that pat on the head. And for some reason, they think it's going to bring them closer to that goal. So there's all this kind of crap that we got to deal with. So yes, there's men that agree with us and there's women that agree with us. But that those women that are agreeing with us and those men that are agreeing with us, they're not getting out into the mainstream media. They're basically quashed. So
Yeah.
I don't know how we get those women that are like, this is bullshit. I don't want to be treated like a baby. I want to be treated like a full grown adult. Quit like patronizing me and agreeing with me all the time. Those women that say that, and my sister is one of those women. She hates that. She hates that stuff. She hates the patronizing. Um, how do we get those women out in the forefront? And how do we get the men that the reflexive? How do we squash down the reflexive? Need to cater to women from some men for those reasons. What do we do? What do we do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm
And
not
I
sure
think,
there's a straight answer to that, to be honest. I mean, I'm just saying this from like the woman's point of view. It's a little difficult when it comes to that, just in the fact that everyone pushes so against it. As you know, there are men obviously that really do want to patronize, and they're very they patronize quite a bit. And I think the issue too is like when it comes to feminists, even toxic feminists, it's like this new idea of they think if you're that kind of person, you're looking for independence. And in a way, feminism is taught that, oh, yeah, you can be independent, but sort of keep patronizing you. But it's not patronizing, it's admiring. And so it's really a situation where you'd have to bring that entire construct and those entire definitions and really thoroughly define and explain all of that to kind of just stop that.
yeah, it's trying to, I guess, take the patronizing, and the uh, I don't know, abetting,
Ass kissing. Yeah.
yeah, of all of that, but um, without doing it in a tantrum. What I mean by that is, and I say I'm kind of beating the drum for leadership, is that it we don't do well, when we show an outraged face, to the public, and like out where we, expose ourselves, so to speak, because then we look irrational and unstable and untrustworthy, right? And I'm thinking about the kind of, especially a young man, who is likely to fall victim to that, that gynocentric impulse to do things for women, um, to watch us throw a fit because of all these terrible things, which, frankly, I think that fit is justified. But what it doesn't do is get him to stop and think, well, maybe it isn't it isn't anybody's long-term good, to continue indulging women who are eager to be indulged and eager to be uh, coddled and excused and protected from accountability, and just stand up and say, I'm not angry, but I'm not doing this anymore, because it's not going anywhere. That's harder, it's harder to not be angry and to still refuse to participate, and just say, this is, this is not where I want to be. And the same goes for the women that that sort of know the score and know that this can't continue. It's very frustrating to be in that situation. I've said before that I speak with the uh, more mature mothers of sons, who are now adult sons, right? And they have a clear picture of what those sons are facing. What they don't have a clear picture of is exactly what to do about it.
Right.
Because
Oh, it's right. There are a growing number of women that are unsatisfied with the situation. They sense that they're being infantilized. They don't like it. They don't like the condescension. They don't like the patronizing. They don't want to be patted on the head. So there are constituencies that we can reach. And taking leadership really just means presenting points of view and a vision of the future that others will sign on to. That's what taking leadership is.
Yep. But Rocco had mentioned that it's unfortunate we don't get that kind of space, in out in the media, out in social media, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll say, at least for the way things are right now, I have the best luck this way, doing this kind of one person at a time, one man at a time, one woman at a time. It's slower, it takes longer, a little more painful, and takes more patience. But I look at what, every time there's anything like pushback from us, that the mainstream media, for example, gets a hold of, what they do is pick it apart until they can find the least palatable and the least mature behavior from among us, and they put that right out front. And the one thing they never do is actually just sit down calmly and talk to us. I don't think there's any one of us that couldn't participate in just a plain interview of what our membership and what our movement stands for. um, that none of us can all of us can be reasonable, all of us can be patient and insightful, but they're never going to do that, okay, because that don't pay the bills. They're going to do is pull up the uh, the most outrageous antics from among us. Fa mentioned that, one time here a while ago, Cassie J pulled it off, but in order to do that, she had to trade her feminism in for realism, and a lot of them are not willing to do that. It's too disruptive. My understanding is Cassie went through quite a lot in order to go through that process, and it's not for everybody.
Yeah, Les, she destroyed her career. She had a promising career being a, quote unquote, neo feminist in the filmmaking industry. And she just, because she is an honest person, this is why she gets so much kudos in the MRA community, MRM, is because she sacrificed that career. Yep. She saw everything and she's like, in good conscience, I can't continue on with the bullshit. Mm-hmm. So she, metaphorically speaking, she put her ass out in the wind. And of course, all of her former allies wanted to shoot it off. Yep. So she paid the ultimate price. And that's another thing. How many people are willing to pay that kind of price? Right. That's like, and I just wanted to speak really quick to the anger thing. It is so important to have somebody who will remain calm and not be anger, not because that's the way that it should be. It's because we do have to recognize I do have, some young blood MRAs go, well, that's not fair. No, it's not fair. And let's be honest here. It is a double standard. We are not allowed to get angry, whereas other marginalized groups have been allowed to get angry. And we can all think of marginalized groups who have been on camera, who have been shouting and screaming and getting angry, and perhaps justifiably so. And the media has said, well, this is, you've got to listen to why they're angry. We don't have that luxury. The media isn't going to say, you've got to listen why these guys are angry. That is not going to happen.
No.
There is a way we can do it, though. And it's basically playing to their tactics by saying that feminism hurts women and children. Feminism, this cultural narrative hurts women and children. Diablia, that awful Reddit sub hurts women and children. It's you have to frame it in a way that causes their instincts for women and children to fire. Otherwise, you're in trouble. Second method is the one we use on our site, where we raise sympathy by showing men's stories to the world. That's another one we can do, and that does sometimes break through. When the story is tragic enough, people will listen. Thing is that people do have sympathy for men. They just have way, way, way more for women, and they are willing to shut down their sympathy for men if they think that it'll help women, and they're willing to shut it down if they think it will help them and their society. Which is why I think
another strong message to send is that woman and man need not be identical to be equal. The two ends of a balanced beam need not be identical to weigh the same. And men and women need not be identical to be equal. We need to re-understand woman as equal partner in the human system, as always played an equal overall force of influence, equally responsible for outcomes. That's another one of many important messages we can be sending.
Indeed. I think we also need to start collaborating with other men's groups and form some sort of global collective with NCFM and Men's Day Out and so on, each sending their leader to form a larger global men's group where we can all bring our issues to the table and engage in global activities. I think having a global governing men's group would basically give us a lot more clout, because it wouldn't just be MRIs in one country, in one area. it would be the whole world, some sort of global men's network. We've been trying to set something like a hub up here that people can come to, but I'm talking about an actual major organization that would rival now and people like that, at least in its presence, its public presence. But thank you very much, Tim, for coming to our live stream. If you ever want to come again, please do. There is an open invite to everyone who wants to participate, friend and foe, because we are happy to debate people.
Yeah, as said, Tim and everyone for coming. We always appreciate having you guys here. It's been a great conversation. And as Moss said, we would really like to have some kind of, at some point, worldwide hub of men's rights groups that could just help solve and promote problems around the world and bring awareness. But for now, we'll try our hardest to bring awareness and starting to make people realize double standards, the reality that both genders are capable of unimaginable things. But with that said, thank you everyone for coming to this week's Friday chat of the Men's Human Rights Server. As Moss said, we're here every Friday at 4 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. And we always enjoy having you guys here. Always message Ma, myself, Blue, if you have any recommendations for topics in the future or in general. And have a good week.